Hey everybody, welcome to a new episode of Frank About Health. This episode is a return of Mr. Ben Lytle and another return of James Swanson. Both of them have been on the show before, talking about healthcare innovation, talking about new technologies, talking about the importance of understanding that in this new world that we're living in post-COVID, that a lot of the innovations that we've noticed, like telehealth, as well as special genetic testing opportunities, testing with radiology exams and stuff like that, are going to be the new norm. And if you remember, we also spoke about Ben Lytle's book, The Potentialist, where he talked about how the next 30 years is going to be a very innovative one in how we learn about how to look towards our own healthcare, where, for example, retirement will be known as refinement. At the same time, we have to be mindful about how we are taking charge and being our own advocate, even as a patient. My co-host, Phyllis Quinlan, will be joining us later in the hour. But at the same time, we wanted to have this follow-up show because if any of you recall from the last episode with Ben, we discussed about how, and I quote Ben saying, medical innovation is another show. And I exactly said we will have to have one. And here we are. So that all being said, I thank you again, Ben, for taking the time to do this show because, you know, I'm looking towards the future, as I'm sure a lot of your readers are and a lot of other people you've spoken to on various podcasts. But I think that there's no best preparation than continually being prepared. And having this second show is like a kind of confirmation or a kind of a reminder, like reminder to get this book, first of all. But at the same time, to be mindful that one's quality of life and one's healthcare management is their own. And I've been saying that on this show for 55 plus episodes now. And now I'm hopefully going to swing this home with you and with James and with Phyllis when she comes on. And we can really leave the audience with a lot of direction for the future. So I haven't yet fully titled this episode. In my mind, I'm thinking that it is healthcare in the future or medical innovation for a healthier future. But either way, when it's finally promoted to all the appropriate channels that talkradio.nyc and our YouTube channel are hosting, it'll definitely have its place where it needs to be seen and understood by everyone who's watching and listening.
Yeah, maybe your health take charge. There we go.
I hope so. I mean, I have been involved in my own kind of strategic positioning of this platform towards a healthier future with Phyllis, and I'm hoping that this show will be the pivot that I've been looking for all along. And I guess in time we will see that evolve. But I did definitely want to answer further questions that may arise from Phyllis when she comes in, because she was unfortunately not able to join us last time. But I also wanted you to further expand on healthcare innovations, after all, on Frank About Health, even though your book covers much more, climate change, education, industry. But we still are looking at the focus that if you don't have your health, you really don't have anything else to focus on. So this is where I'm just glad that both of you are here to really, you know, piggyback off of each other and bring some of your concepts together that you're both familiar with from your experience in government as well as in finance. And at the same time, my whole knowledge of healthcare is really self-taught through advocacy training and through the education system. So I'm actually learning as a student as well. So again, thank you, Ben, for being here. And of course, James, thank you for always coming. You know? So Ben, how has life been in the last 2 weeks since you were last here?
It's just been just wonderful. My life, thank goodness, is always just pretty wonderful. So I'm enjoying this very much and enjoying it out talking about the book and talking about the future and trying to raise awareness. That's what mine's all about. Is trying to raise awareness to prepare now for the greatest period of change in human history, and do it now. Don't wait. So that's what I feel a little bit like the town crier here. So,
Well, you did say that we are in our fourth industrial revolution,
Right.
and you did point out that even though this book talks about the next 30 years, a lot of the change is happening now. A lot of
Right.
people might be aware of it or are sensing that there's change happening, but you are bringing it to light and much quicker, especially for the whether it's the Gen Z population that needs to
Right.
learn a new way of our future, but at the same time, the elderly population. And I think you also mentioned on the last show that as far as medical professionals are concerned, there is not as much easy replacement, especially as they are aging out or retiring early, or maybe because of burnout issues during the pandemic, they have left their career. They wanted to make changes, but we didn't have enough replacement for those doctors that we or
Right.
nurses that we weren't
Right.
able to sustain.
Yeah,
You know?
it's part of a broader change that's going on, Frank, and it's one of the four change forces that I speak to in the book, which is changing demographics, and we've all grown up thinking overpopulation. That's all that's pretty much what we taught. We all saw a lot of really rotten movies about overpopulation and all of the effects. But that isn't and hasn't been the primary concern for people who've been paying attention to this for the past 25 years. It's actually underpopulation. And it's not imagination, it's not speculation, it's actually, it has already occurred and it's continuing to occur. In developed countries, well, just to set the baseline, in any country, any population, you have to have 2.1 children per female on average to keep the population flat. The stunning thing is not one single developed country in the world is at 2.1. They're from 1.7 down to as low as 1.0 in South Korea and in a few other places. Japan is almost there. And in a lot of Western Europe, which we all love to go to on vacation, Italy, Spain, they're at 1.3. And that's essentially a free fall. That means that in a few generations, that population will be a minority in their own country. And a few generations after that, they could cease to exist or virtually cease to exist. But, again, this has been known. There was a terrific book written in 2004 by a fellow named Ben Wattenberg, who was with the big think tank, American Enterprise Institute. And he also had a TV show in Boston called Think Tank. And he wrote this book called Fewer, and it predicted exactly what's happening now. But what nobody paid any attention. I mean, Ben tried to get people to listen, but if you think back yourself in the last 20 years, you haven't heard one politician or one major media outlet talk about consequences of having a population decline. And how does that affect an economy? How does that affect a society? Nobody paid any attention to it. But today, we're all realizing suddenly we don't have enough pilots. American Airlines stops 100 flights. Southwest, cancels 100 flights. Where did the pilots go? Did they suddenly just all disappear? No, this has been coming, because what's happening is we haven't been replacing the pilots reaching retirement age. The same thing's happening in physicians and nurses and every other type of healthcare. And by the way, almost every other profession. It's just statistically, that's what happens. So we're in a period of some of our greatest period of retirement for baby boomers. And at the same time, we don't have enough people coming into it. The universities are all facing declines in student populations. A lot of K through 12 schools, same thing. And so what we're experiencing is what's called the cliff effect. And the cliff effect is we're all going through our lives. We got plenty to worry about. So we're not thinking about things like population decline. And suddenly we wake up and it's very real. And now it affects us. I can't get a flight, or my flight's now more expensive, or I need to see a specialist. I call to see a specialist and they say it's 2 months or maybe 3 before I can see a specialist. And oh, by the way, I have to talk to a physician's assistant who's kind of like a gatekeeper for that specialist before I can see him. That's very common. And this is going to get more severe because our population's aging. And as we age, we consume more healthcare resources, and now we got scarcer resources. So that's where the subject of tonight's show really hits home, which is one of the primary things we have to accomplish with medical technology is catch more disease before it happens. And there's some wonderful things going on there that James can talk about. And also to significantly expand the productivity of the physicians we have, so that they can treat a lot more patients with the help of technology. So that's kind of a long summary, but it is my number one concern in healthcare for this next 2 or 3 decades, because we got a long way to go to get the technology there. And this problem is building very fast. And where your audience as patients will see it, we all see it, is again, we try to get an appointment, but then also, let's say we have a complex condition and I've got 3, 4, 5, 6 specialists I'm seeing. Maybe I'm dealing with a dozen or 15 or 20 pharmaceuticals. Who's going to coordinate all that? And particularly when I can't get timely appointments. So how do I get a timely diagnosis? How do I get timely treatment? That is a coming challenge we're all going to face, and there's just no way around it. And so we need to be sharp, first of all, taking better care of our health than ever before, and then making sure we have an advocate who can help us navigate this stuff.
That's very interesting. So that pretty much not only do we all have to be our own advocates, but there has to be almost like a designated professional who is an advocate to keep the coordination and flow continuing with all the patient activities that are going on.
Except they don't exist. And they're for the most part, they don't exist. And for the most part, neither private insurance nor government insurance pays for anyone to coordinate your care. There are very limited cases where they do that. So that falls on the patient or the patient's advocates that are, family and friends and whoever else you can find. But for the most part, there's a great entrepreneurial opportunity there for people who want to get in healthcare to find a way to coordinate that. But today, it would all have to be pretty much private pay. I'm hoping that government policy will see over time that this is actually costing them money, not saving them money, not having someone to coordinate care. But again, today, it's still fairly limited.
Well, we're about to have our first break. So when we get back, we want to talk about not only the limitations of the healthcare, but also a little bit about how the insurance industry has been transitioning as a result of these changes. And then I guess, James, also want to bring back some of the talk that you had on Frank About Health a while back on CRISPR, because I want to see how that integrates into what Ben's been just talking about. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned as we're here again with both Ben Lytle and James Swanson talking about healthcare innovations for the future of healthcare right here on talkradio.nyc and on our YouTube channel. Stay tuned.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant. And on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you on edge? Hey, we live in challenging, edgy times, so let's lean in. I'm Sandra Bargman, the host of The Edge of Every Day, which airs each Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc. Tune in live with me and my friends and colleagues as we share stories and perspectives about pushing boundaries and exploring our rough edges. That's The Edge of Every Day on Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Welcome back. And we were just talking right now about pretty much how we're dealing with the increasing retirement/refinement of the baby boomer population, the lack of replacement based on the current population of those entering the healthcare space, as well as the understanding that things are going to get a little bit difficult in terms of preparing for the costs that technology is going to make insurance companies not be a viable source of funding those treatment plans, especially if you're in a situation where you're looking for elder care in an assisted living facility and things like that. Now, Ben, you have experience being the CEO of Anthem. That's one thing that I am familiar with your background. And you, James, you've had a role in working with insurance companies in the Boston area, I gather, in understanding their valuations and understanding their investment strategies as they were working within this space. Do the both of you have any commentary in terms of the role that insurance is going to play, whether it's on the government side or even on the private side? Or what are they not playing enough with, where we have to, of course, replace what they're not going to be able to provide?
James, would you like to go ahead? Then
I'll just jump in on a couple things. Yeah, first of all, insurance companies are always maligned for, and we have some ballot issues in the state I live in right now, Massachusetts, to force insurance companies to have a certain payout when it comes to medical costs. Some of it's ridiculous. The capital markets tend to adjust for these things, but we need insurance because we're collectively spreading the risk of our disease across a broad number of people, and the healthy people, their premiums will help us if we do get sick. But I want to point out something that's really interesting about what Ben said, and I think we need to think about this. He talks about the fertility rates of the developed countries, and they're falling, and this is true, and our leaders are not mentioning this. So the role of an author is to alert people to this. And interestingly enough, one of the most famous people in this country now, he's not a political guy, Elon Musk, who runs Tesla and SpaceX, has been saying we need to have more babies because we're in trouble. And he's ridiculed in the press. He's made a mockery of by saying that. And that is mindset. And how does mindset, which views insurance companies as bad, pharmaceutical companies as bad, even though they've solved many of our immediate problems, mindset has to change. And the role of the Cassandras of this world, the warnings, have now got to come from the literary community, because the established outlets of Twitter and all this are not thinking through and looking at the numbers. They have 18 characters saying everything's fine and we hate Trump, but no one's looking at the deep numbers that Ben's talking about. So I want to pass it back to Ben, because the issue of older people not being serviced by enough young professionals, including pilots, is happening as we speak. And Elon Musk brings it up and he gets mocked and ridiculed.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate because, James, as I said, a brilliant academic, who was not a political guy at all, Ben Wattenberg, wrote this incredible book in 2004 and laid out exactly what's happening. And I've been talking about this ever since, ever since I became aware of it in the late 90s. I actually built a couple of businesses with that in mind, that we have this problem coming and we need to be thinking about it. And how do we extend the health of seniors? How do we coordinate their care? And that's my biggest concern, but I think it's also the greatest opportunity. And going back to your point, the innovators are going to come out of the private sector. They just are. Government, much outside of defense, does not do a lot of innovation. And so the private sector, and sometimes that's people that you perhaps resent because they're large or you think that they make too much money, whatever it is. But companies like health plans, companies like pharmaceuticals, companies like private equity and venture capital who fund new startups who are trying to solve some of these problems. That's our solution. It's not going to come from, there's not going to be any cavalry riding in over the hill. It's going to be a lot of little cavalry people out there working in the private sector that gets it done. And there's definitely opportunity to do it. I think the biggest thing we're trying to figure out now is how do we really make a difference when people age in doing it efficiently for them and taking better care of them, and at the same time actually saving money. And we can, because that's when people float around as you know, James, when people float around in the healthcare system and they're bounced from one specialty to another, there's no answers. We're just chewing up not only their time and putting stress on them, but we're wasting money. We're going to end up with a much more serious case than if we dealt with it sooner. So that's where I think the health plans are trying to find a solution to this too. I think large employers are looking for it. And I think government is looking for it. Frank, for your listeners, one other thing is if you're a business person, and I would bet that a lot of the people who are listening to your show who are business people or business owners or CEOs or executives, they're aware of the problem. Whether or not they have the numbers, I don't know. But you can guarantee there is a huge productivity drain in every company in the United States for employees who are on their part-time trying to coordinate the care and be the advocate for elderly parents. You can make book on it. And in some cases, some employers are aware of it and are trying to give them support to do that, because that is a problem now, and it's going to be a growing problem as the population ages and as more they have to depend more on their children to help them advocate care for them.
I'd like to introduce my co-host, Phyllis Quinlan. Thank you for joining us. We've just spent the last, 25 minutes talking about a lot of the innovations that healthcare is bringing into our society going forward, how cost effective or costly they may be, how insurance role or lack of function within it is involved, the government's role in it. But I couldn't wait till you got here, because we started the show with Ben discussing how this is impacting the professional doctors, the nurses, the caregivers, and we all know that that is one of your many specialties. So
right.
I'm glad you were able to join us right here as we're approaching almost the second half of the show.
Well, thank you for being patient for my arrival. I really do. Sorry I'm joining late, but I did not want to miss this episode for anything. James, how are you? It's good to see you. How's your family?
Everyone's well, thank you. It's good to see you.
And Larry, it's a pleasure to meet you.
Ben, I go by Ben.
Ben, okay. I was able to listen to a previous episode, and it was really quite informative. So it's just a pleasure to be able to join everybody tonight.
Oh my God, I did not even issue the disclaimer as the show began. Please, everybody out there, forgive me. So that being said, let me do my due diligence. Please be aware, everybody, this show is not meant for anything but information and conversational purposes. It is not meant to dissuade you or deter you from working with your current physician or the medications or treatment regimen you are on. If you feel that you need, after listening to what you've just heard or what you will hear throughout the rest of this episode of Frank About Health, if you need to consult things with your physician, we offer that as an opportunity. But that all being said, these are not the views of talkradio.nyc or of Frank About Health, but they are the views in this book, The Potentialist. So for that reason, if you find them to concur with your own mindset, I highly recommend the book. All right. I'm glad I was able to put the house cleaning in order. Okay, so I think that we still have plenty of time to talk, but I know that now that you've joined us, Phyllis, when we return from the next commercial break, we're definitely going to want to center the conversation on the medical professional and from the various professional roles and hats that you've worn, from working with Share the Care, from dealing as a nurse, from being a coach, a trainer, and also being a co-host on Frank About Health. We want to talk about how all of their roles are going to evolve with the new technology paradigm that Ben refers to in the book, what James has mentioned on the shows that we've done together, and really emphasize how we collectively can show a healthier future. All right. Again, Ben, prior to Phyllis's arrival, you were talking about how the insurance industry basically is going to be in a situation where it really needs to be doubly protected by our own resources, correct?
I didn't follow you there, Frank.
I don't know if doubly protected is the right word. I'm saying that we're going to have to definitely go and find our own financial reserves in order to accommodate.
Well, I think what's going to happen over time, particularly as we get into some of the more life extending or life improving technologies, it's already there, that are not necessarily, they're on the borderline between what you would consider a choice or where you would consider it mandatory health care. Those areas are great, and they're really difficult for health plans to make those calls. Health plans are happy to cover anything as long as we put it in the premium. If we don't collect money for it, we can't pay for it. Well, when you start and everybody says, well, why don't you cover this? Why don't you cover that? Why don't you cover this? Well, because suddenly your premiums would be 3 times the amounts they are there. And so that's why health plans, always with that eye on affordability, they are careful about what they cover and they don't cover. And they want to make sure it's efficacious, that it's got proven technology behind it, that it's had time in use, that we really understand it. So that's their reluctance. Again, they can, as long as they can put it in the premium, they don't want to have it not in the premium. Then someone say, hey, pay for this. Well, it's not in the contract. We didn't collect premium for it. So that's essentially the way their mindset has to work. The point you just raised, there are times today it's very difficult to judge between whether something is experimental or whether it's proven. The rules are getting better with there, but it's not easy. It's also really hard to tell with new technologies, will this really pay off? Is it really something we should be doing and supporting? Because to some degree, when it's covered by an insurance plan, there's almost an endorsement, though it must be okay. And really, I think that's going to put pressure that we're going to see over time. We're going to see our out-of-pocket budget grow. And I don't see any way to avoid that.
Wow. So now we're ready for our break, and we definitely want to now see the role that both the patient and the professional is going to play with this. Well, it's both a conflict and an opportunity in disguise, and we want to flesh that out when we return right here on this episode of Frank About Health, both on talkradio.nyc and on our YouTube channel. So please stay tuned.
Are you passionate about the conversation around racism? Hi, I'm Reverend Dr. TLC, host of the Dismantle Racism Show, which airs every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc. Join me and my amazing guests as we discuss ways to uncover, dismantle, and eradicate racism. That's Thursdays at 11 o'clock a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a small business trying to navigate the COVID-19 related employment laws? Hello, I'm Eric Sauver, employment law business law attorney and host of the new radio show, Employment Law Today. On my show, we'll have guests to discuss the common employment law challenges business owners are facing during these trying times. Tune in on Tuesday evenings from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host a program, Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc, now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the second half hour of this episode of Frank About Health with the return of Ben Lytle, James Swanson, and of course Phyllis, Quinlan, my co-host. Now's the time that I really want to flesh out the medical professionals' involvement in this new revolution that we've been talking about.
So I can speak from a personal perspective. I really don't want to speak for the profession.
Right.
I don't want to speak for the medical profession because I'm a nurse. I'm a doctorate prepared nurse. But over the 44 years that I have practiced critical care, emergency trauma. I have practiced long-term care and subacute care, assisted living. And, occasionally the subacute care, quite honestly, has really replaced our med-surg units. So I feel as though probably the only thing I've rarely ever done, maybe a case or two, is home care. So I have quite a diverse clinical setting, which demands different types of education and, of course, clinical competency and skills to go with it. But one of the things that I think I have learned over the years, and this is no deference whatsoever to the medical breakthroughs and the technological breakthroughs that are happening, that are life-saving and important. This is no judgment around any of that. But what I do see is a little bit more of a need for perspective around expectations, because I firmly believe that people should have the right to self-determination, which of course we capture in what we call advanced care, what we call our advanced directives, where you have a MALTS, which is a medical order for life-sustaining treatment, or you have something else that says you want CPR, you don't want CPR, you want dialysis, you don't want dialysis. But we need to have more education and I think open forums around what advanced diseases look like, and the expectation that you can be made, we can help you in feeling comfortable. We can help you to live your life to the fullest for as long as you have, but there is no cure currently known to us given the science and the information technology we have today. And I really feel that there is a need, because in the understanding of advanced care illnesses and the understanding that we can offer you self-determination and hopefully start a conversation between the patient and their family that probably has never happened and needs to happen, there can be clarity and there can be coordination of effort and a sense of peace around honoring that person's last wishes. When I see a lot of conflict with technology and and medical breakthroughs and other things coming through is that those things, as wonderful and as great as they are to offer to a certain segment of the population, they offer very little in terms of relief or extension of life at end of life issues.
Mm.
And people are not necessarily informed of that. And I think right now, nurses are struggling with the moral dilemma around extension of life for extension's sake and not necessarily for quality of life and dignity. And
Right.
it's trying very hard to navigate that very delicate balance between what the patient wants and what the family is comfortable allowing to happen or letting happen, or the family is concerned about what other people might say, and where you have to kind of redirect the family's attention back on, well, what does the family member want? And of course, everything centers on that all important conversation that of transparency and clarity around what your wishes are for the end of your life. What do you want to be subjected to? What interventions are you willing to accept that may be life sustaining, but not necessarily quality of life sustaining? And having that conversation so everybody is clear. For those patients who are in a position to really take advantage of the latest medical technologies and technical breakthroughs and medication breakthroughs, I think we have to really find a way to make sure our moral center has to be around accessibility, that these things are offered to everyone and not just to those that can pay.
Right. And that's what you were referring to, Ben, on the last show about democratizing innovation, that things that are not offered to everybody has to be offered to everybody in mass distribution at some point. Correct?
Right.
Okay.
So I don't know, quite honestly, I'm not informed enough. I don't know if there are clauses in research grants or monies that come from the government, if there's from an IHI grant or the NIH grants that are out there for helping to develop different types of interventions and different types of technology. I don't know if there are clauses in those grants that say if there is a breakthrough that comes from the fruition of your research, then there has to be a social obligation to ensure that we price it at a point that makes it accessible to everyone. If we're not doing that, I think that's something we have to think about going forward.
Well, one thing, Phyllis, that an entrepreneur wins when they get it to more people. So typically they're going to be highly motivated to build a product. Matter of fact, it's hard to get financing from any kind of private financing for an idea that can't be scaled to millions of people. And that's a lot of what people like me do, or nowadays, not from my health plan days, but we look for ways to take a really good idea and to scale it to many, many people. And I've had personal experience with that several times, and it's both as an investor and as so you don't really have to regulate it because the investors are motivated to do it. So it's just it's not like pharmaceuticals where they're trying to earn back their research. Typically most inventions on the health services side don't have that kind of millions and millions and hundreds of millions of dollars going into it before it's ever used. So in most of the times they're going to be self-motivated.
Ben, when we're talking about third-party payers, are you envisioning a national system or a system that ultimately, whether it's national or not, that kind of mimics Medicare Part A and then supplements, so that we don't have just healthcare insurance, we have healthcare insurance and then the insurance for what the insurance doesn't cover?
We don't have that structure today, and I don't
see that happening. Do you see that as a model for the future?
I wish it were, but I don't see it happening. I do think that there is a percentage of the I'm sure you probably know the numbers, but a lot of the listeners may not, that about 5% of the population is responsible for about 50% of all healthcare costs. It's a huge concentration, and about 10% are responsible for about 80%. Now, it's not the same people every year. People move in and out of that population, but the message from it is that the cost of healthcare is highly concentrated. And I think, and a lot of those people are the same people year after year after year. And what we lack today are a series of companies they're beginning to develop with value-based care. You know, we're that we're slowly moving into more value-based care as a way for paying for healthcare. But what we need is we need 1,000 companies out there, a vibrant new industry that specializes in taking the people who have very complex conditions and helping them manage that, whatever they need. And no matter what it is, that they'll take a fixed price from the government, if the government's a payer, a fixed price from insurance, and then say, let us manage this. And the patients aren't obligated to stay in. If they're not happy, they can leave and go back to whatever they were doing. But we need a vibrant free market right now around those kinds of innovations. And we're just getting started. But if you talk about bending the curve in healthcare costs, that's the only way you can bend it because of that concentration of cost. So I've been hoping for some time that we would see those kind of companies emerge and then see the health plans make them their partner. And so that favors a structure like you're talking about, where the healthcare, when you hit that threshold where your disease and the cost of it is very complex and very expensive, you go into another pool of cost, and you pretty much move out of the insurance.
What I hear you describing is what we in the nursing world would call care management or care navigation, where
Right.
you are trying to coordinate everything throughout the care continuum, whether they are in home, in the community, using a satellite, going to the emergency department, getting admitted, going to rehab, going back home, that you have a series of care navigators helping you navigate
Right. And it's
efficiently and effectively.
right, and it's essentially concentrating on these when you hit a very complex situation, and it sort of starts with the way our financing system. We kind of have a mixed financing system. In some cases, it's by level of income, like Medicaid. In other cases, it's by your age, like Medicare. In other places, it's by where you work. But it's not driven by the severity of disease. And if you think about it, if we had a healthcare system specialized around primary care, basic primary care, and then a little more complex diagnostic care, and then interventional care, where essentially I go in, I get fixed, and I'm done. And then I've got a long-term. You think about structuring it around the disease state, it starts to get a lot more efficient. And so that's the barrier we have to overcome right now. Is we built it for a different purpose. We built the financing system and the delivery system really for a different purpose.
Well, we're about to enter our final break. That being said, when we come back, we want to talk about exactly the future in terms of the delivery system, as well as what are things that entrepreneurs should be looking at, which they probably are not at the moment. I mean, because it sounds like that with healthcare being an ecosystem unto itself, that technology is also influencing its change or its evolution, that there are just opportunities that have not yet been tapped into. So,
well, and Frank, one thing I'd love to hear James speak to is, from his seat in the stadium, is if he had to pick the top 2 or 3 technologies he thinks that are going to really revolutionize care in the next 10 to 15 years. I'd love to hear his perspective on that if you are.
Me too,
absolutely. Ben. So James, when we return, you'll be right on.
No pressure.
All right. So we'll be right back in a few. Stay tuned right here on talkradio.nyc and our YouTube channel.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host a program, Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
In a post-COVID world, you may have many unanswered questions regarding your health. Are you looking to live a healthier lifestyle? Do you have a desire to learn more about mental health and enhance your quality of life? Or do you just want to participate in self-understanding and awareness? I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each Thursday, I will tackle these questions and work to enlighten you. Tune in every Thursday at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will be Frank About Health to advocate for all of us.
Calling all pet lovers.
Pet Avengers, assemble!
On the Professionals and Animal Lovers show, we believe the bond between animal lovers is incredibly strong. It mirrors that bond between pets and their owners. Through this program, we come together to learn, educate, and advocate.
Join us live every Wednesday at 2 p.m. at talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to our final segment of this episode. I just wanted to point out some geographics here. Ben, you're in Phoenix, Arizona right now. So for you, it's probably 2 to 3 hours behind. And you, James, are in Boston. And both Phyllis and I are here in New York City enjoying the evening. So I'm just glad we were able to come together to really reflect again on the book, The Potentialist, as well as really explore the innovations that have been taking over the healthcare profession, especially when it comes down to how insurance is evolving or needs to really redesign itself. You had a lot of good points there about if we were focusing on the disease specifically as a delivery system rather than on the other geographics of the way that the payer program works currently. But then, as you said, you wanted to hear about James's view on some of the investments or stocks or
well, the technologies, yeah. I mean, the technologies, he's in a good seat in the stadium, I think, to see what the technologies are that are emerging and how fast they're coming online and what he thinks the ultimate impact is. So I didn't want to miss the chance to have an expert speak to that. So,
yes.
Well, thank you. And, we were talking, and I don't want anyone to think Ben's book is depressing, because you were talking about some things that we all need to focus on, but there's a lot of hope in what you write about in The Potentialist. And I'll just put a flashlight on a couple. One is CRISPR. And for those who are listening, CRISPR is a gene editing tool. It's a combination of technology and medicine. It stands for clustered, regularly interspaced palindromic repeats. A palindrome is you reverse the letters. The word refer, it reads backwards and forwards. So they're taking the designations of our basic components of human life, the gene, putting numbers and letters on it. But now they're able to edit it. And there's a subcomponent of CRISPR, Cas9, has to do with proteins. What does that have to do with Ben and Phyllis is talking about? Phyllis is talking about end-of-life care. A lot of that is neurologically determined. And we know there's a real potentialist. Her name is Ann Padori at Children's Hospital. She's raising zebrafish in her lab, and she is interjecting genetic mutations into her fish. They live 3 years. So in 12 years, you get 4 generations of these fish. She's focusing on epilepsy, and Frank is very experienced with that particular affliction, what it does to 2% of humanity. But now they're finding with CRISPR, they can edit the gene makeup of these fish. And if they could do this with human beings, to alter Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's isn't necessarily a genetic disease, but has a genetic component, and other types of dementia. And if we all have to save the money it takes to live a high quality of life without technology, I would be discouraged, but I'm excited about what I'm reading, about what I'm hearing, and I've met some of these people. And one more I just want to throw out there, and then Phyllis and Ben jump in. fMRI, which is functional magnetic resonance machines, they're now watching how the hippocampus lights up when fear occurs, or someone makes a use of a word in a political statement that's negative and causes you to vote a certain way. The amygdala or the hippocampus lights up. It's crude now, but what is happening in that field of neurology is beginning to shed light on how our brains and biases work. And if we can educate people that they have inherent biases, or there are things that light up in their brain without their conscious awareness, and make it conscious, we will have a better life out there. And companies are jumping on this. So there is hope. And I want to leave a hopeful word there and let you two jump in.
Yeah, I think, first of all, James, thank you for pointing out that The Potentialist is a book of great optimism, and it is. People, we all forget with our daily things that we look around, we see things that aren't right, that bother us. That's human nature, but we forget we're 3 million year old species. And we shouldn't, we've gone through a lot worse than what we're going through right now. And we'll overcome this again. The odds are far on that we will come through the next few decades far stronger than we've ever been. And I couldn't agree with you more. The kinds of innovations you're talking about are dramatic. I mean, these are not small things. You can truly alter the human state. So I thank you for pointing that out, and I believe at the end of the day we're headed to a much better place. Not going to be easy getting there. It never is. This is a birthing process, and so we have to go through the childbirth of a new age here. But the new age is going to be better. I'm confident.
Well, actually, this is your first in a book of 3.
Right, exactly. And the next 2 will be pointing out even more prescriptively how you get from here to there.
Great. Well, the thing that intrigues me of what James just offered, as soon as he said the word protein, I was thinking of Alzheimer's, because that's what happens. You have these protein deposits on the neurons, and it interferes with synaptic connections. And depending on what area of the brain is affected, shows up in the behavior or in the symptom that's demonstrated in the patient. So the patient could, not every patient with dementia has emotional outbursts, but if they have some dementia that's located in the prefrontal cortex or in the frontal lobe, emotional outbursts may be part of this. So not every dementia patient has issues with mobility, but if that dementia is located in the parietal zone, then of course muscle coordination and motion and movement is impaired. So, it shows up differently, but I have to agree, thinking about, my work with long-term care assisted living and just listening to elders in the emergency department, their greatest fear is loss of independence. And they're more than willing to understand that they may need an assistive device, i.e. they may need a cane, they may need a walker, they may even need a wheelchair. But the thought of losing your ability to be cognitively astute and have self-determination and be dependent upon others is terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. So any breakthroughs along those ways can be absolutely life-altering. My brother has Parkinson's, and it's fairly advanced at this point. But he's also up there. He's much older than I am. He's 80 years old. And, even though the life expectancy of an 80-year-old is somewhere between 10 and 15 years conventionally, his greatest fear is living to that age, but not necessarily being totally in control of himself or having his full capacities. I don't think the idea of being in a wheelchair is bothering him so much as not necessarily fully being able to have full mentation and competency in that regard. So it's wonderful to hear about those kinds of breakthroughs. The other one you talked about, where we can start to map where behavior and thought processes are, perhaps through PET scanning or other radiological diagnostic devices, gets me a little concerned, because I wish I had enough faith in human nature not to misuse that. I wish I had enough faith not to make sure that how we ever do that is not violating, again, our right for free will, and for that to be misused in terms of programming or other things, or creating the perfect something or other in someone else's vision of what perfect is and not necessarily what the patient's vision is. So I wish I had more faith in mankind, but experience tells me.
That's okay, Phyllis. I have enough for both of us.
Do you? Okay, that's good.
Yeah, I have enough faith for both of us. So I believe if you,
but the
if you
first
look,
breakthrough, I'm in with both feet. I'm in with both feet. I think anything
Okay.
that can help us get our arms around devastating neurological diseases and consequences is a really good thing.
Well, we are about 2 minutes to end, but the bottom line is that you, James, you, Phyllis, and especially you, Ben, with this book is showing that the future is healthy. And it's something that we really have to learn to understand better, get educated better, try to, I mean, I understand how you feel, Phyllis, about sometimes trying to question if you're getting the right advice from professionals or even family members and stuff like that. But it is within our own advocacy, as Ben, you've been talking about, and James, you've been also telling me about, that we just have to be able to own it. Like I keep saying on Frank About Health, we have to own our healthcare, manage our quality of life, and do best what we can to give to others if they just don't have the same resources that we are able to collectively do. And the second show is coming to a wrap up, but I just want to thank you again, Ben, you, James, and of course, Phyllis, always for being here. And I just wanted to say, everybody, stay tuned for Friday's slate of shows, which are Philanthropy in Focus with Tommy D and Always Friday with Stephen Fry, right here on talkradio.nyc. We'll be back next week right here on Frank About Health. So everyone, we're signing off right now. Thanks for being here, and I will be contacting all of you very shortly. And thanks again, Sam.
Yeah, James, Phyllis, nice to meet you.
Good to meet you.
Okay.
I'm here. Thank you.
Again,